Well, it's lovely to be able to speak to you, particularly for a movie like this, because obviously it's already been breaking records, and it's a huge, huge movie for you to have worked on it. And I know on the first one, you were obviously part of the art department. So I'm curious
Indeed.
how you would say that experience way back in the late 2000s there, how it prepared you to come on board a movie like The Way of Water as production designer.
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, we were privy to so much of what was going on in Jim's mind and the way that the design process occurred on Avatar 1, on the first one. I think the main takeaway you couldn't miss was the thoroughness and the specificity of the whole process, right? That it was exploratory, but it was exploratory not in a kind of vague, kind of creatively chasing phantoms way that the process can sometimes be, but exploratory in a with almost a scientific approach, whether it was with the technology or the biology of the creatures or the biology of the Navi, and how they live within the ecosystem of Pandora. I think it was just getting an exposure to, oh wow, like Jim world builds in a way that I've never seen before, and there's a million great franchises out there. There's a million, I'm not taking away anything from anybody else. But in my experience anyway, Jim kind of goes there. He goes deep into these processes and how the thing, like, what would it really be? Like, let's put aside what would be cool for a moment. And he will very quickly, when he needs to, grab the director hat or the audience hat and put it back on and be like, oh, it's too complicated. The eye won't perceive it quickly enough. It just can't work for the amount of screen time I know I have for that thing. Or it doesn't work because it doesn't metaphorically serve this story point I'm trying to hammer home later in the script, or whatever it might be. But a lot of it is the fun of just being a kind of fake scientist, a fake neurologist. I mean, I worked on a lot of the graphics and conceptual stuff along with other graphic designers for the link system, right? So not only the mechanics of the link system, but the sort of the story telegraphing graphics that went with it, right? And a lot of movies hire science advisors, but we hire like really specific science advisors that are topical. So we met with neurologists. We ended up doing it again because we had the big brain holographic thing in Avatar 2, Spider's brain. So to talk to Jim about, like, neuroanatomy in a sort of, in me attempting to be somewhat educated with the research I've done, in front of neurologists and reading research and all that stuff, it's just sort of extraordinary. And it's not like the movie stops and has a little educational moment, like by the way, all this crap is true. Like, it doesn't do that, but I think that psychologically, hopefully what it does, in the same way that really great visual effects that you just don't question, what that level of design and design thinking does is it creates a backdrop world that feels like there's depth kind of hiding around every corner. It just feels real, so you don't have to understand try to read the fine print and whatever, whether that's actual fine print in a graphic or just a detail in the corner of a whaling ship or whatever we've done in the second movie on the hard surface side. But I think you subconsciously feel that the thought's been put in.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And, I thought it was really interesting. Obviously, as I said, long time since you worked on the first film, but that time has passed in this world as well. So when it came to obviously the Navi culture and even how the RDA has evolved, what did that process entail? Because obviously I imagine it's not as simple as just a sequel where you jump in and it's the same as last time. So much has changed. That must have been quite a challenge for you.
That's true. It was a challenge and a huge opportunity. It was just fun, because as much as everyone loves Avatar 1, us included, and very proud of the work that we did under the production designers, Rob Stromberg and Rick Carter back then. The chance to kind of like find a way to make it a little new, find a way to convey the changes in the world that you're referring to was an awesome opportunity. I should just mention, by way of explanation, that we have two production designers on Avatar sequels, just as I mentioned, there were two on the first one. And so I handle the sort of hard surface human tech of it all, like everything to do with whatever conventional sets and vehicles and things like that. And my co-designer Dylan Cole handles the world of Pandora, the organic side of things, whether that's Navi architecture or plant designs or creature designs. And so it's great to kind of divide and conquer. That just the workload is a really good reason to have two production designers. That alone is a good reason. But in addition, we kind of have two different brains interfacing with Jim, as a triangle, but like it's from slightly different angles and tweaking Jim's geekery in different ways, from our different levels of expertise. And so you do end up with a kind of hopefully richly realized world kind of on both sides of the battle, so to speak. But I'll offer up examples from both sides. So speaking for Dylan, the biggest challenge that he had in terms of set design was the Reef Village, right? Metcaina Village, which, to your point, it's not just a new evolution of how the forest people live. It's like a whole new place. It's an entirely new ecosystem. It's an entirely new culture, a new anatomy of Na'vi. They speak the same language, but other than that, there's a huge amount of cultural difference between them. And that all had to be reflected in the design. It had to, one little anecdote I love from being in meetings with Jim talking to Dylan was, Jim asked for these rolled up weather tarps to be added to the tops of some of the structures in the village for hurricane season, and there's no hurricane season in the movie. But between the sort of the sun bleaching of the material and the fact that you saw that they were making repairs to those, they're called marui, right? These beautiful, elegant structures that are suspended among the mangrove roots. They're making repairs over time. So you literally see the gray versus the intermediate versus the rich new cane material or straw-like mat material that goes into it. You see that, like Jim asked for, the rolled up tarps that are for the hurricane season so that you can actually seal these things up and totally wind tight them for scenes that will never be in any movie. So again, that's the kind of thought that gets put into things in the background with Jim, and I think it really shows on screen. On my side of things, in the hard surface, my job was to convey what the script was also conveying, which was that, like, we're not just here to run a mine, Colonel, right? It's like a whole new level of operation. That Pandora is no longer a sort of like profit. It's still a profit center with the Tolkien hunting, obviously, right? That's the new unobtainium in terms of a hot product that the RDA is trying to pull out of the planet. But it is entirely reconfigured in the sense that it's a true colonial mission at this point, right? It's not just sending out enough bodies to get a job done to extract some materials. It's like, no, we're trying to homestead here, right? And so the creation of a giant new base, it's a base that's 6 miles in diameter, and that's before you add in the two extra miles in every direction of the kill zone that protects it, right? So it's like the size of Long Beach, California. I mean, it's like a major environment. So Hell's Gate was awesome and really evocative and full of pollution and whatever in the first one, but what we've done in the new movies, dwarfs it. And so the same thing had to apply to any of the other technologies. Like, what is a next generation? 10 years later, not only has time passed, but we also have 3D printing, so we can probably send the very latest CAD files from Earth of the latest engineering ideas and print them on planet quickly, right? And we also got our ass kicked last time, right? So the RDA knows that it's up against really formidable forces, and so all the vehicles had to suggest that sort of next gen, like, we're not going to get our ass kicked again kind of quality to it, which meant leaning into, if Avatar 1 was a Vietnam metaphor for vehicle design, right? At least in terms of the aerial vehicles, it meant to evoke the Vietnam War with, over the jungle and how they operated and the colors and all that stuff. We have a seafaring story to a large extent, and we also wanted to convey something like sort of 5th gen fighter type technology, right? So we borrowed things like the bone line on a stealth aircraft and integrated them into our designs, not because the Na'vi have radar, because they don't, but just to convey to the audience that, to give it a more high speed, more almost jet fighter sort of vibe, high performance cruelty is the motto, RDA motto that I keep in mind sometimes. And of course, we went just as Dylan was going to a new location on the sea and having to deal with that as a visual element and as a way that the Na'vi live. So too with us, right? With the Sea Dragon craft and how it operates as a whaling ship. Of course, Jim, being the super geek, was like, it's going to be a wing and ground effect aircraft. Like, okay. He's like, I'm like in a chronopon. He's like, yeah, that's it. So, of course, it can't just be some boring ship. So it's a boat, it's a plane, it's everything in between. It's a hydrofoil. And so that, I think when you jump into technical, but both cinematic and technical challenges like that, of such a sort of attempting to be epic scale of this new menacing enemy ship, you're bound to push it into new territory.
Yeah, but it's incredible. And I'm glad you mentioned the Sea Dragon, because of course at the end of the movie, the two worlds collide in a way with the battle that takes place on that
Absolutely.
ship. And it's so interesting because there's so many different parts to that, obviously, with the various family members and the fighting, and obviously the ship is turning. So for you, what
Yeah.
the complexity when you, as a production designer, of coming up with a set that not just has to be used in one way, but you're turning it on its head, literally, to be used in various others too.
Yeah. I mean, the Sea Dragon just evolved by like kind of death of a thousand little micro changes. Jim would say like, oh, we must have had like 6 different Sea Dragons. We just cheated this, that, and the other. And it's actually not true. We ended up being able to reconcile all of the newly discovered, sequentially discovered needs of the set. We reconcile it into more or less a master layout that works. Once it's turned upside down and there's silt, we took the liberty to cheat in a valve head or a staircase or whatever to create interesting kind of compositional elements if we needed to. But when you're above water, it's all pretty integrated, pretty good continuity, as one would say. So but it just took time. It just took kind of exploring what the vessel was, in the abstract, right? It's okay. So it's wing and ground effect. We sort of sold Jim on the idea that it should be a hydrofoil too, because water flying in the air is really fun, so it needed to have a personality. It needed to have the right size. It needed to have some sense of capability to operate as a mothership for all these different vehicles. Some of the ways that we proposed it would at first aren't the ones that ended up in the film, but we're thinking about ramps, and we had the Mako subs going on down these ramps that would tip down like teeth from the foredeck, and being geeks and all that stuff, and at the same time trying to explore it as basically a monster design, right? I mean, even though it needs to feel like a real aircraft and convey its reality through all of the detailing that we did, it also needs to have a face, needs to have a personality, all that stuff. So we're looking at different creature references. Manta rays was something that we slipped into early on, because they naturally have a sort of a big back. They sort of, it's not a, because if you look at real world wing ground effect, the Soviet Chronoplon from the 80s, they are like slim little jets with little stubby wings, which doesn't work for us at all, right? So we needed to find like a nice broad backed creature reference, and it turned out that manta rays are looking at catfish mouths, whale shark mouths. This thing it's a hunting ship, right? So I wanted to convey that it's almost like it has a feeding behavior, so not only does it have the mouth and a kind of angry eye slit, right, but it opens up, right? And then we painted the facades of the ship inside, right behind the foredeck, red, so that basically as it opens up, it feels like you're looking inside of a beast, right, or inside of a mouth or something like that. So there are all these things we did sort of almost metaphorically, but then in the death of a thousand details of the actual, the sight lines between characters, like where people had to be tied up but not be visible to someone else who's infiltrating, so that you don't mix those storylines. It was a lot of changing the layout. It was a lot of Jim spontaneously coming up with just plain cool ideas that we would execute, like the idea that the Makos would be just suspended in the moon pool and just drop like bombs into the water, right? That's a pure Jim idea. It's like, man, just drop them in. Yeah. So in his desire for things to cut efficiently in the film, he comes up with really great engineering ideas for doing stuff fast. But what was I going to say? The other thing is, it's in so many destroyed configurations, right? We have moments where there's fire up on the helideck, and then there's fire down below because pieces of the helicopter fell down. There were all these different moments of it hasn't run aground. Oh, now it's run aground. That did give us a lot of opportunities to take things like Mako subs and just smash them around and use them as extra dressing pieces to create layouts, right? So, when Neytiri is killing a bunch of guys on the foredeck, the fact that there's a smushed crab suit there, which we then had to back engineer, having it be there, through the sequence department, had to figure out how Piacon would swing the crane and smash one crab suit into another and mush it so that it ended up being in the right place and all that stuff. But then it serves a good function as cover for some RDA guys that are sweeping around, cover for Neytiri, so that she can sneak up on them and not get shot. So anyway, I don't even know if I answered your question, but at least I at least teased at the edges of how many complexities there were.
Oh, yeah, it's both mind blowing. And Ben, just we have to wrap with just one quick final question
Sure.
for you. I know Avatar 3 is being shot, and John Landau has teased we might be heading to Earth. So is there anything you can tease about that third movie? And of course, the fourth and fifth ones got release dates today. Are you planning to be part of this franchise for the long haul, do you think?
I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, no, we're working on 3 right now, trying to get it out the door. With the visual effects handoff process, and before anything can be rendered, Jim's got to do his cameras, right? Because it's not that's where the shots come from, is a step that, before you hand it off to Weta or to ILM. So we're busily improving and prepping the sets to get ready for that process. And as far as teasing anything more from it, that is not in my job description. That may be in John Landau's job
I have to
description.
try.
That is not mine. But all I can say is that, like I said, we started in 2013 on this thing, with a team that grew and contained so many wonderful people over time. We've been working on it as an overall world with many interesting places to go and things to see from the very beginning. And so I'll just say, I can't tell you what's coming, but I can tell you a lot of cool stuff is coming.
Oh, based on what we've seen in these first two and your work on this one, I can't wait to see where we're heading. So Ben, thank you so much for
Awesome.
taking the time, and thank you for the work you did on this movie.
Of course. Thank you so
What an
much.
awesome result.
Yeah.